Good evening. I'm Shannon White. I'm the chapter executive for the Alzheimer's Association, the Greater Kentucky and Southern Indiana chapter. And we're so excited tonight to have you join us for a Care Partners Toolkit, Lessons from the Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. I'm going to introduce David Troxel, and he is an internationally known expert in Alzheimer's disease and memory care. He started the Lexington chapter of the Alzheimer's Association and was also the executive director of the Santa Barbara chapter for 10 years. He holds a master's degree in public health from Rutgers Medical School and has co-authored 6 books, including The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. David's Best Friends Approach, which he founded in Kentucky, is built on a seemingly simple premise that when people living with memory loss need most is a friend, a best friend. David teaches caregivers how to understand and fulfill this best friend's role, including special caregiving techniques and tools. He lives in Sacramento, California, and we are thrilled to have him back in Kentucky this evening. David?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Shannon. I've got the clicker here. Yes. And it is such an honor and a pleasure to be with the Alzheimer's Association and to be in Kentucky. As Shannon said, I began my career at the Sanders Brown Center on Aging at the University of Kentucky, and back in the 1980s, it was just one of 10 federally funded research centers in the whole country. And it's there that I met my wonderful friend and colleague, Virginia Bell, the social worker. I was the health educator, outreach person. She was a social worker. And Virginia is still thriving, going strong in Lexington, Kentucky. And the two of us began working together. And I think I've been to every county in Kentucky. How about that? Representing the University of Kentucky and back then the Alzheimer's Association. And that's where so much of what I'll be talking about today kind of began to get our ideas going about working with families, being with support groups, and realizing there's a lot we can do to bring out the best in people with Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. So again, the Alzheimer's Association in Kentucky, I feel like it's a great full circle moment for me to be with you all, so thank you very much. So again, I'm known for something called the Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care, again created with Virginia Bell, but I've had a rich history with the Alzheimer's Association, university centers, day centers, and just delighted to be with you all. I have, like so many of you, been a family care partner. My mom, Dorothy, passed away in 2008 with Alzheimer's, and she actually lived in memory care for 3 years in assisted living in Sacramento. So I've kind of been on both sides of this equation in terms of being not only an advocate for people with dementia, a writer, but also been someone who's utilized services so much. So happy to be here, and thanks to my friends at Trilogy for sponsoring today. I work as an educational partner and consultant to Trilogy, and we'll talk more about them in a few minutes. So today I'm going to kind of offer a little update about Alzheimer's disease and dementia care today. I'm with the Alzheimer's Association, so there's not a lot I can teach you all, but I thought I would take a couple of slides in this area and just share a few thoughts I have. We'll discuss the current drug discovery pipeline, because we know that our mission, particularly being here at the Alzheimer's Association office, is to find a cure, find a prevention. There's so much we need to do. I'll talk about best friends, and then I'm going to really drill down, because I know we're live streaming this, and talk about some key strategies to be an effective caregiver. I'm going to kind of present a bit of a toolkit of some of my best and brightest, I hope, ideas about how to, again, bring out the best in the person with Alzheimer's disease and other dementia. So I want to just pause and reflect a little bit. I was very taken with a cover from Barron's magazine, the financial magazine organized by Wall Street Journal a few months ago. And take a look at the headline here, The Other Pandemic, The Other Pandemic. And I think you all know that Alzheimer's Association is an enormous public health, Alzheimer's disease is an enormous public health challenge. And until COVID, it was the #1 most expensive illness in the US, over $300 billion. Yesterday was World Alzheimer's Day, and this is not just a US problem. Every 3 seconds, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease around the world. But I'm very proud that the US is certainly the leader in research around the world. And I think if we find that effective treatment or cure, hopefully it will be soon, and hopefully from someone in the US, because as this slide says, Alzheimer's disease remains still the only one of the top 10 causes of death in the US that we don't really know that we can prevent it, and there is no effective medicine for it. So again, we have some enormous challenges ahead. In 2050, by 2050, the number of people with dementia is expected to triple, and I think we also know that the current medications are very modest. And I have to say, I began my career here in Lexington, University of Kentucky, in 1986. We truly don't really have medically any more effective tools today than we did 30 plus years ago. You know, the current medicines for dementia are modest in what they do. We really need that breakthrough drug, and hopefully it will be there very, very soon. Now, what is the good news? Because I think it's very easy to focus still on all the losses and challenges of Alzheimer's disease. I think the good news, first of all, a huge shout out to Alzheimer's Association advocates. We are at a record level of Alzheimer's research funding, $2.3 billion. Thank you, Alzheimer's Association, and all the advocates out there. And I had someone say to me the other day, like, oh, $2.3 billion, that's a lot of money. Well, Alzheimer's disease was chronically underfunded for so many years. We know this is an enormously expensive disease, and so I think this is actually still a drop in the bucket. But the great thing is, with money comes studies, comes research, and I've never been more optimistic than I am today. So we shall see. Hopefully a year from now, we'll continue to have some more good news. What I think is very interesting about good news with dementia, when I started off in this field, even then people were saying, oh, well, how do you prevent or delay the onset of dementia? And you know, for a number of years, I have to say the scientific community, frankly, even the Alzheimer's Association was skeptical, like, hey, let's not get ahead of the science, let's not make promises that we can't keep. There were a lot of things that, you know, kind of crashed and burned. We talked about maybe the statin drugs might be good for prevention, vitamin E, you know, ginkgo. So many different theories really did not hold up with research. But more and more, we actually are discovering that lifestyle can have an impact on this disease. So a few things just to kind of mention, particularly for people watching this on the streaming, that exercise, for example, of all the studies out there about lifestyle factors, people who exercise regularly may get Alzheimer's disease later in life than people who don't. And if you have Alzheimer's disease and you exercise, it might slow it down. So that's very exciting. Diet, the Mediterranean diet, you know, that diet rich in seafood, olive oil, greens, vegetables, less red meat, less dairy, sorry about that. But that Mediterranean diet actually has been clinically shown to add to longevity of life, and it definitely is a brain-healthy diet. Lifelong learning. A friend of mine who's a neuroscientist says we should all learn a new brain-rich skill every decade of our life, which I think is really interesting. You know, so I don't know, many of you I hope will leave today. Maybe you want to take up harp lessons, guitar lessons, learn a foreign language, take up knitting, something like that would be very, very good. Sleep. This is one that I'm actually worried about for myself, but having a good night's sleep is excellent for the brain, may help delay the onset of Alzheimer's, and I'm unfortunately like 6 or 7 hours, which should probably be more like 8 hours. Controlling blood sugar. What the Alzheimer's Association and others have said, and I love this phrase, that what is good for the heart is good for the head. What is good for the heart is good for the head. Having that heart-friendly lifestyle, controlling your blood sugar, very, very interesting. And I kind of saved the best for last, and this is really my favorite, but social engagement. There have been studies that people who have friends, people who have a husband, wife, or partner, people who sing in the church choir and are active, they get Alzheimer's disease, we think, later in life than the loners. So I like to say that the brain loves company. The brain loves company. And people who are really active, I think that is very good. This is one reason why I'm a big fan of adult day centers, that socialization, and one reason why assisted living, I think, is very powerful because, again, you have that communal setup. I think that can be very, very helpful. So we are learning that there are some good ways we can hopefully make some good things happen. Now, one other slide I thought I'd throw in, a colleague and a friend of mine, Dr. Jeff Cummings, who's probably one of the top 10 neurologists in the world. He publishes an annual review talking about the research pipeline, you know, what is ahead, okay? And again, I think there's some good news here, even with this pandemic kind of umbrella we're all dealing with. In 2020, there were 121 unique therapies and clinical trials. About a third of them were in phase 3, the final step for potential approval. And what's interesting about the research pipeline is I think it's more diverse than it's ever been. We're looking at all sorts of different things. There's some studies about medications that are focused on behavior. I'm very excited about all the things that are ahead for us. Also, there are 12 studies that in 2020 were looking at behavioral symptoms of dementia. Again, things that hopefully can be positive for caregivers without having to rely on the psychotropic drugs that we don't like whatsoever. I know my friends at Trilogy who are sponsoring this today with their BFF, Best Friends Forever program. We'll talk about that in a second. They're a big fan of hugs are better than drugs, and I think we'll talk more about that maybe in the Q&A. And this is the part that I think I have to say that I'm so impressed with. In 2020, there were 31,000 volunteers who were active in supporting clinical studies. So again, Dr. Cummings, he publishes his annual review, very, very helpful. Now, I think I just have maybe one or two more slides about dementia itself and some of the things to think about, because I was actually flying here a few days ago from California and doing some work on the plane, and the woman next to me said, I can't help but notice you're looking at material on Alzheimer's. My mother has Alzheimer's. She just got diagnosed. What now? What now? And I'm sure the Alzheimer's Association gets lots of those questions. And this slide, I think, is very compelling to me because we want to do a number of things as an effective caregiver. We want to learn all we can. We want to create this social environment. Don't wait to use services. But this one, I think, is very practical and interesting. We want to keep the person as healthy as possible. So another colleague and friend of mine, Dr. Michael McLeod, who recently retired, an excellent, outstanding geriatrician from University of California, Davis in Sacramento, I love his concept here. He says, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, don't travel alone. Alzheimer's disease doesn't travel alone. And what he means by that is that almost everybody with Alzheimer's disease often will have other things going on, many of which are actually treatable. All right, we can discover them, we can treat them, these sort of other kinds of issues. But if we miss them, everything gets worse, all right? And so you see here his list. Watch for treatable conditions, pain, depression, malnutrition, something we should look at when someone's been living alone by themselves. Over-medication, medication errors, polypharmacy, where maybe someone's seeing a bunch of doctors and they're getting the same, lots of different medications for the same diagnosis, all right? Blood sugar, sleep, stroke, alcohol, and then how about this? A physician actually talks about loneliness and isolation, something a lot of doctors don't talk about. So this is a very important slide. I'm just gonna highlight two of them, pain and depression, okay? Now, I've been in Louisville this week and been kept pretty busy. Now, what if a night or two ago in my hotel, I started to get a terrible toothache, okay? I could see that some infection was going on. It was really causing me agony, okay? What would I do? Well, I would call the hotel desk. I'd call my friends in Louisville. I need a dentist. You gotta get me an emergency appointment. You see, I could diagnose the pain I'm under, and I could make steps to take care of it, right? And hopefully get an appointment and get the emergency root canal or whatever it is, right? But think about this. You see, somebody living with dementia, they might start to experience a toothache, and they can't always name it. They can't initiate steps to take. Instead, they just feel pain, all right? How are any of us when we're in pain? Well, we withdraw from normal activities, right? We may stop eating. We might get irritable, okay? I guess if you're in enough pain, you might slap or hit somebody who's trying to take care of you. And so again, imagine someone with dementia. They're having this pain that we're missing. Everything's going to get worse. And of course, in a nightmare scenario, maybe the doctor will say, oh my goodness, he slapped that nice caregiver. We better put him on some powerful antipsychotic medications or some psychotropic meds because after all, he's combative, when they've missed the underlying cause. So watch for pain. One little trick I have, my mom's neurologist, Dr. Harbaugh in Santa Barbara, I love what he said to me once. He said, you know, David, your mother's dementia is like a slow and lazy river, a slow and lazy river. So remember, as a caregiver, if your family member is doing pretty well, or some of you who work in assisted living, you have a resident who's doing pretty well, and boom, one day they aren't, they've not gone into stage 7B of Alzheimer's last night at 10 o'clock. They're sick. Something's going on. Depression. Depression is so interesting. There's actually studies dating back to the 1950s that people with long histories of clinical depression are at greater risk later in life for cognitive disorders, okay? Depression is an enemy of the brain. And the Alzheimer's Association says that 40% of people who have Alzheimer's disease will experience depression sometime during their illness, all right? So depression, we won't go into all the details today, but you kind of begin to know it when you see it, right? And if you suspect depression, I want you to get on top of this, right? You need to either get that person more active, engaged, music therapy, time outdoors, sunshine, or use the antidepressant medications. Because again, it's one of those things that if you don't catch, it can drag down their ability to function, their participation in activities, and not be a good thing. So again, a few things there. I think this is very, very helpful. Now, Again, what now? What now? Okay? Well, let me talk about the development of the best friends approach, particularly here that I'm in Kentucky. Back in the 80s, my colleague Virginia Bell and I were working at Sanders Brown Center on Aging. I was working with the Alzheimer's Association. And of course, families would call us, and they'd have so many questions and so many needs. And we would do a great job with support groups, do a lot of sort of social support. But if somebody said to me, David, I'm taking care of my mother at home. I have young children. My mother has dementia. What do I do when my mother runs out the front door and my children run out the back door? Who do I go after? All right? And we didn't have a lot of answers. So Virginia, my colleague and close friend, started one of the first adult day centers in the country called Helping Hand back then, now Best Friends. The center's 35 years old in Lexington and a big national, international model. And back then, we were doing adult daycare as respite, to give family members a break, okay? And really, we designed the program to do that primarily. So people would drop mom off at the adult day center. They'd say, my mother, David, she fights me all day long. She won't cooperate. She won't do anything. She's ornery. Good luck. Virginia and I joked, there was one daughter who dropped mom off who was so agitated and angry. I said to Virginia, I'm a little worried she's not going to pick up her mother at the end of the day. I think maybe the daughter's gotten a one-way ticket to Rio de Janeiro and we may never see the daughter again. But what happened, and this was so powerful, the adult day center, we had fun, we had music, we had ice cream, we had visitors and pets, and we just kind of threw a big party ultimately, right? And we had volunteers back then. That's still a very volunteer-rich program. We had volunteers who we called best friends. We don't even remember exactly who came up with that. And we'd assign a volunteer to work with one of the adult day center clients each day, and we had, I think, about 150 volunteers. Virginia's kind of the Pied Piper of volunteerism. And the most interesting thing happened. The clients at the adult day center, whose own families labeled them impossible, difficult, ornery, combative, they had a delightful day. They just seemed to enjoy themselves. They did lots of things with us, and we really had almost no problems. And Virginia and I were honestly sort of scratching our head well, what's going on? Why is this working? And that was sort of our light bulb moment, to use an Oprah phrase, our light bulb moment that, the environment matters. Our care approaches matter, that if we do things in a certain way, we can actually lift the person up and have them be at their very best, right? So this is sort of a historic moment in my career and Virginia's career and how we started to be writing about our experiences. Because what we began to sort of realize is that what the person with dementia needs is a best friend, somebody to have empathy, walk a mile in their shoes, to know a lot about the person, celebrate their life story. The person with dementia is losing their life histories, and so we want to become their biographers. How many of you here like hot and spicy food? Anybody? Hot sauce? Aha! About half the crowd, right? How would you feel if you moved somewhere where all the food was uniformly bland, there was no such thing as hot sauce? How would that affect your life? I'm guessing some of you would be pretty unhappy, right? People who like hot food like hot food. So again, life story work in dementia, the person may not be able to tell us they enjoy spicy food, but if we have that little $3 bottle of Tabasco sauce and we can sprinkle it on and help them, I would argue that's giving them a lot of quality of life. So life story work, knowing that, very important. Communications, because after all, friends talk, they text, they visit. We focused on communication. We focused on affection, leading from the heart, sharing this, and doing things, because friends do things together, right? They go to a football game, they listen to music, they go dancing, they just chit-chat and visit, right? And so this idea that what a person needs is a best friend, I think is very, very similar. And we discovered that when we talk to our clients at the day center, when I introduced myself, oh, hey, Bob, I'm David, I'm your best friend today, how are you? They would just go, they'd breathe it in. It was very, friendship's very affirming. So again, we created this in Kentucky. We wrote our first book in the mid-90s, and the book, I think people were ready for a more positive approach, and now this idea of a best friends approach is in use all over the world. And Trilogy here in Kentucky has actually adopted Best Friends as their official model. They have something called the BFF program, Best Friends Forever. Very, very exciting. Now, I started to say what a pivotal moment was for me in Virginia, and I'll tell it to you right now. The head of the Center on Aging back then was an incredibly brilliant man, my mentor, Dr. Bill Marksberry. Even now, he's considered one of the top neurologists of many decades. He passed away a few years ago. Dr. Marksberry was a revered figure, very famous, very, very important. And one day he called me and said, David, what's this I hear about this day center you're doing with Virginia Bell? We both were UK employees still. He said, I'll be there Friday around 2 o'clock. Now, having Dr. Marksberry visit is like having, for us, it was like having the President of the United States come. We were like, and he did say, David, I have 20 minutes. I'll be there for 20 minutes when I come check it out. Well, Dr. Marksberry, the rascal, didn't come at 2 o'clock. He came at 11 a.m. I think he kind of ambushed us. And again, he had a little entourage with him, and he said, I only have 20 minutes. Well, would you believe Dr. Marksberry, this world-famous neurologist, stayed 2.5 hours? He danced the hokey pokey with Elna. He served ice cream. He took walks with people. He was totally engaged in this social day program. Now, remember, this is something very interesting. We recruited from the UK Memory Disorder Clinic. Most of these people were his own patients, and he was just blown away by what he was seeing, okay? When he left, he said to Virginia Bell and me, he said, my God, this program, best friends, this whole idea of socialization, this day center, this is the treatment for Alzheimer's disease. So again, this idea that all of this is very, very powerful, I think will be very important for all of you to think about. Now, I've mentioned my host today, Trilogy, and I'll just do a little shout out because Virginia Bell and I are so excited when companies embrace our work. And you took a really nice little spin on it, all of you. They took the program and they decided to kind of do something a little different with it. And now they have staff who identify as BFFs, Best Friends Forever, the Best Friends program, kind of put into practice, creative life story work, innovative staff training. I've been here this week doing a lot of videos and lots of different kind of cool exercises and workbooks and cards and ideas to really give staff training. And something called the Daily Rhythms Activity Programming, stressing socialization, engagement, creative and stimulating calendars, music, learning, conversation. It really is a contemporary approach I want to applaud Trilogy for, and I want to encourage any of you who are listening to the streaming that when you are looking for memory care, look for a program with activities, engagement, ask about staff training. Being on the internet now, we may have people from all over the world, but do your due diligence because there are providers out there who have points of difference, who are really doing innovations and have a spark and affection and love. Very important. As I said earlier, we still are struggling on the medical front with medicines, so we want to have a company, an organization, I think the association definitely supports this, where we know that socialization is the treatment for dementia in so many ways. So let me drill down a little bit further about some of these elements of Best Friends that I think my goal will be to offer all of you some toolkits and ideas about this. And I'm going to go back to life story work, because Virginia and I, early in our careers with the Day Center, we were determined to know a lot about each person. And it was quite extraordinary because there were people who'd been in musical theater, there were judges, there were people who'd been prominent Kentuckians, and we noticed that we had to become their memories in so many ways, but when we talked to them about their past, we would kind of spark their memories in so many cases. And when we could kind of get them going, get them started, they would talk about their lives, talk about their careers. And you see, again, knowing their professions, hobbies, talents, and awards. Many of us, I hope in this room, it's a talented group, I can tell, we've all won prizes over the years. And if you win some kind of award, it tends to stick in your memory. So maybe you won the Nurse of the Year, the Teacher of the Year, maybe you were the Kiwanis Club president. We had a lady in memory care one time, it was so great, she remembered, she was 90, right? She remembered winning Miss 7th Grade Square Root. My all-time favorite award, Miss 7th Grade Square Root. Hometown stories, daily rituals, and of course spirituality. We had a woman we worked with at the Day Center who was a Buddhist, and when she got agitated, we studied Buddhism. We had a little bronze Buddha. We'd put it in her hand, and she would almost kind of do a little meditative prayer just knowing about her history was so powerful. Again, so all of this is really quite extraordinary and very, very good. I'll have to tell you a bit about my own mother and just the power of even knowing one profound thing about a person with dementia. My mother, Dorothy, was actually born in Vancouver, Canada. Lived in Hong Kong much of her life, and then in Montreal. She was Canadian. Her parents were from Manchester, England. And my mother, very much sort of having this sense of, being an Anglophile, loving everything British. My mother, for decades, would have every afternoon Earl Grey tea with milk. All right? Now, when my mother moved into memory care, I made sure in Sacramento that her building knew about this ritual and tradition, right? And guess what? When she was having a bad day, the staff would say, Dorothy, oh my goodness, your son hasn't visited in weeks or two or 3 weeks. Now, maybe I'd been there that morning and she just forgot. They'd say, Dorothy, how about I pour you a lovely cup of Earl Grey tea with milk, just the way you like it? Ah, heaven, right? And so that little step where a caregiver would offer her ritual, her Earl Grey tea with milk, I think it made her think that, I'm in a safe place. They know me and I know them, right? So again, little things like this can make a big difference with life story. This is a picture of her in Paris, France in the 1950s. I think she looks pretty great, don't you think? And it's funny because the best I could tell, my mom and dad lived in Paris for 4 or 5 years. The best I could tell, they had no money, but my mother's in a new outfit in every single picture, ladies. So there you go. She pulled it off. Communication. Okay. Again, and kudos to the Alzheimer's Association. I love their materials on their website. They've got lots of handouts on those topics. But again, best friends communicate, okay? And what are some strategies I'd like to recommend to you? Well, just some obvious ones, minimize distractions, because I know my mother, even when I was sitting with her in assisted living, helping her with her lunch or dinner, if she was seated in a place where there was a lot of traffic, a lot of things going on, she'd get distracted and not eat. So try to be in a kind of quieter place, make eye contact, use hand gestures. Again, nonverbal communication, smiling, positive communication. Give lots of compliments. Now, some family members might say, well, gosh, David, what's that all about? Well, again, think about the world of people with dementia. Let's practice our empathy. What would it be like to have this progressive illness where you have to give things up? You may have to move out of your house. You may have to give up your ability to write a check or go shopping, credit cards, driving, give up your beloved job. You can imagine that self-esteem suffers, that the person begins to feel depressed or sad, right? So I think if you can offer an authentic compliment, gosh, Dad, you are an amazing father. Mom, you look so beautiful today in that pretty pink sweater, okay? And we do a lot of staff training about giving compliments, right? What happens is, I think this little gesture lifts the person up. And we've kind of, don't you agree? I think compliments have kind of gone out of style. People don't do that as much as they used to. And I think that's too bad. And we're all busy. When I work with staff, I know staff are so busy. I will often say, hey, when you give a compliment, remember that a compliment maybe only takes 30 seconds, right? And how much does a compliment cost? It's free. So practice those compliments. Asking for opinions. Do you think I need a necktie in this outfit? I have a job interview later today. Or do you think I look okay? Oh, young man, get a necktie. Okay, sir, I will, right? What does it mean when you ask somebody their opinion? It means that you value them, right? So my all-time favorite, my friend Tom Alimo, who's here from Trilogy, he's heard this story a couple times, but it really is my all-time favorite. I was in South San Francisco a few years ago, and there was a young CNA, young caregiver working in memory care. I was spending the day with them as a consultant, and this young caregiver, 24, 25, came in and said, okay, ladies, good morning, everybody, good morning. What will it be today? Is today a red lipstick day or a pink lipstick day? And they all chatted, mostly the ladies, and they said, pink. And she said, okay, pink it is. And she put on her pink lipstick, and she got a big round of applause. Now, I said, what is going on? And they said, oh, every day, I'm sorry I forgot her name, Margie. Every day Margie comes in, and the residents vote on her shade of lipstick. Every day she comes in, the residents vote on her shade of lipstick. Isn't that sweet? It's, to me, really incredible because it makes them feel valued. It kind of evokes some old mother-daughter traditions, I think, and I think it's just a very sweet way to make connection. Okay, next one, for those of you particularly at home on the streaming, many of you are new to this, probably the most fundamental communication lessons: don't argue, don't correct. And this is a tough one because we're used to a certain family dynamic, and maybe you and your spouse have always had a little bit of, give and take. But you see, a person with dementia, if they're getting something wrong, if they're making a mistake, it's the disease, not the person, isn't it? So we have to understand. So if somebody, says President Eisenhower is doing a great job, you want to say, Mom, I like Ike too, not what's wrong with you, it's President Biden, right? So again, try your best here. And of course, I like to say sometimes you just have to fall on the sword. If things aren't going well, don't try to explain and reason. That rationality, that problem solving, that suffers with dementia. So sometimes you just want to say, Mom, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. I won't do that again. I apologize. And you move on, right? And again, be affirming, be encouraging. All of these things are very, very important. One of the things that I think has been so powerful for me to think about as a writer myself, as well as someone who's an advocate and someone who just tries to be thoughtful about this disease. I love this quote. It's sort of my little touchstone as a caregiver, a touchstone as a professional. Maya Angelou, she certainly did not write this about Alzheimer's disease, but isn't this perfect? People will forget what you did, people will forget what you've said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Very powerful. And probably the most painful thing our family members go through is when the person with dementia forgets who you are. I was very lucky. My mom knew me to the very end. But one of my best friends, not only did the mother not remember her, but would mix her up all the time with the sister or the aunt or just couldn't quite get the connection right. Very painful. But I think we take Maya's quote and kind of rethink this a little bit. What's sweet, I think, and what maybe is a bit healing, is that even if somebody forgets that you're Joyce, her daughter, I think the person with dementia still retains that emotional memory that you're someone special. The person with dementia retains that emotional memory that you're a friend, that you're someone special, a best friend, and that can be very, very good. Okay, a few more of my kind of toolkit ideas here, and I promise we'll leave some time for some questions and discussion. Dementia-related behavior. We could obviously do a full 2 or 3 hours on this. I want to start off by saying, first of all, it's not on the slide, but it's a myth that everybody with dementia is combative or everybody with dementia is difficult. My mother was very pleasantly confused. She was very loving, and she really didn't have too many bad moments. But when you have this disease that's causing this slow, progressive decline in memory, thinking, and judgment, again, you may not even know where you are, who's around you. You can imagine that you begin to lose sort of insight, and you begin to have trouble if someone wants to, get you in the shower. So again, dementia-related behavior: refusal to do personal care, showers, paranoia, apathy, aggression. This word delusion, a good definition here: a delusion is a fixed false idea. I think you owe me $10,000, or I think you're my sister and you're not. And even hiding things, hoarding things, rearranging household items. These are all kinds of things that can come with dementia. So I'm just going to put it out there that there are a lot of good resources here. But remember that the contemporary view of dementia care is that it is the disease, not the person, and that there's often a message behind this behavior. We want to try to figure out what is the root cause. Does it happen at a certain time of day when something's happening? We want to rule out pain and depression, try not to label or blame the person. Again, we just want to kind of calmly kind of process this. Brainstorm with your friends at the Alzheimer's Association, other professionals, try to figure things out. And then look for the life story for inspiration and develop a common script. So I'm going to give you like 1 or 2 quick examples of this. Years ago, when I was the director of the Santa Barbara Alzheimer's Association, I got a call from one of our family members. Santa Barbara is a small town, 80,000 people. We could get around pretty fast. And this woman said, "David, can you come over? I have a real crisis on my hand. My husband is just, flipping out at the neighbors. He's over there yelling at them. He had dementia." So I drive over and visit them. And it turns out the husband wakes up that morning, and for some reason, he has this delusion that the neighbors had moved the fence in 6 feet during the night. He was furious, right? He thought they'd moved the fence in without his permission, and they were trying to steal his land. Now, who knows where this kind of delusion comes from? Visual spatial issues, whatever. Maybe he had some early land dispute. But you see, he was convinced. All right? He was over at their house, banging on their door, yelling at them, complaining. His wife said, "Honey, you're wrong. There's nothing going on. What's wrong with you? Stop this nonsense." what did he begin to think about his wife? She's in on it, right? And so I went over there and I was trying to kind of intervene. I think I became the bad guy for a while. And I finally realized, there's this famous Albert Einstein saying that I think a lot of caregivers have had to process: insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Sometimes families struggle to kind of come up with interventions. Anyway, we ended up kind of using what I like to call the knack. And in the Best Friends approach, we have something called the knack, the art of doing difficult things with ease. When you really begin to apply these lessons of friendship and quality dementia care. And the knack is, don't argue, don't correct, be on their side, be flexible, listen, right? So we said to the husband, and this is what we came up with: honey, the wife said to him, honey, I am so sorry this might have happened. Oh my goodness, this is terrible. We will look into this. Let's check our records. I'll call the city. But oh my goodness, this is something else, isn't it? Let's get on top of this. So in other words, she gave him the benefit of the doubt. For those of you who are family members, try not to become the bad guy. The husband had this profound delusion, and she wanted to kind of just, give him this maybe possibility. Now, of course, it wasn't true, but what happened over the next few weeks when he was agitated about this: oh dear, we're working on this. She even, talk about being clever, she actually hired a survey company to come over, set up their equipment, and stomp around the backyard for an hour or two, right? She didn't even want the report, because after all, if she'd given the report, he wouldn't have believed it. I think she spent $150. They came and walked around the backyard. Honey, we're working on it. She de-escalated. She was empathetic. She was sympathetic. What happened about 4 weeks into this delusion? Poof, it just went away. Right? So again, the idea of looking for behaviors. We had another quick example from my days with Santa Barbara Alzheimer's, a woman who had a lot of paranoia about her husband, okay? She thought he was bringing in ladies of ill repute at night. That was her phrase. I love that, ladies of ill repute. Now, she had three French poodles who barked at everything, so I don't think he really was sneaking people in. But anyway, it was actually kind of worrisome, because what if the wife had put a vase and conked him over the head, right? Well, in doing an assessment, again, looking for the root cause behavior, we discovered that the house was very poorly lit, okay? Lots of clutter, old furniture and carpets and heavy curtains, right? And so I worked with the son, and we began getting the lighting better, cleaning up the house a bit when the husband and wife were out of the house, getting better lighting, opening the curtains during the day, bringing more light, more simplicity, less clutter. Guess what happened? Her paranoia began being reduced, and it finally went away. No psychotropic drugs, no psychiatric drugs. Again, there's a lot of things we can do to look for solutions for behavior. So a few more things here, and this is something, again, I love to talk about: activities and engagement. And families struggle, what to do with mom, what to do with mom. There are a lot of good resources out there, and there's so many things we can do. I'll just mention, doing more with food and dining, looking at mom's recipe books. Music, I'll talk about in a minute, very powerful. Art, lifelong learning, exercise, time outdoors. Purposeful work and chores. Have mom help you fold the towels, have dad help you sweep. I had a caregiver once who bought these wooden bird feeder kits and would make them with his father. You want to have people feel productive and needed. We all have a need to be needed. And even helping others, making dog biscuits for the local animal shelter, things like that, very, very good. So let me talk about a few very specific activities here. And this is really perhaps my favorite: music. Okay, here's a picture of one of my personal heroes, Dr. Oliver Sacks, a very renowned neurologist who passed away a few years ago. He was played by Robin Williams in that great movie Awakenings, if you ever saw that, about a group of people with sleeping sickness, encephalitis that Dr. Sacks sort of brought back to life. And so Dr. Sacks has written about music, and he says it's the language of dementia. It's so important. And we know that from a research point of view and a sort of biological point of view, music and song lyrics actually live in a different part of the brain than words and language. And so just as music can change our mood, give us energy, make us happy, the same is true for people with dementia. So double down, triple down, quadruple down on music. Get music into mom's bedroom, get music into your common areas. It can change mood. I had a friend who years ago would put on Louis Armstrong's I Think to Myself, What a Wonderful World. And she'd play that for her husband every morning when he awakened, and he would just wake up with this big smile, and they'd dance their way into the shower. Again, music can be very, very, very powerful. Programming some activities. With the internet now, there's so many cool things you can do. And I've written a couple books on activities, but really there's so many things you can do. And just to give you an example, apples, okay? We're entering fall, it's apple season. You can have some fun with apples with your family member. Bake apple recipes, talk about old sayings. All right, here we go. An apple a day. You are the apple of my. The apple doesn't fall too far from the. Yeah, there we go. Very good. Name some foods with apples. What are some foods we can make with apples? Applesauce. Apple pie. Apple cider. Candied apples. There's probably dozens of, right? How about some other old sayings like, or even some classic things like Johnny Appleseed, right? Reading about his history. You can do a taste test with various apples, make these various foods. So I encourage family members and even, professionals to kind of have some fun and maybe 1 month just devote it to apples and doing all sorts of apple pies and apple recipes, old sayings, things like that, reading about the history of Johnny Appleseed, and having some fun and being playful around some topics. We've already talked about exercise again. I think this is something people enjoy, and I will tell you that if you're having some issues around mobility, don't hesitate to ask your doctor to get a physical therapy or occupational therapy referral. Sometimes it's very short-lived with a person with dementia, but you might get 3 or 4 sessions, and they can be very, very helpful. So again, as I kind of begin to wind down our formal talk, and then we'll go to some questions and discussions, I want to say that we are still hoping that the next few years we will see a new generation of medications that will help people with dementia. I think where we are at right now, which is so interesting, is that people will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's when we develop more effective screening tools. People will be diagnosed much earlier. I can't remember the exact number, but I think it's 60 or 70% we think of people with Alzheimer's disease, if they are diagnosed at all, are diagnosed very late in their journey. Now, more and more we think that if you can develop a way to identify Alzheimer's much earlier, it sounds a bit scary, right? But maybe you diagnose it through various kinds of tests, right? That you can diagnose someone maybe in their 50s, 20 years before their symptoms ever would appear, all right? If we can do that, I think we have a better chance of finding medications that can delay and push back the onset, right? I heard a famous doctor once say that if we could delay the average onset of Alzheimer's by just 5 years, half the cases in the world would go away. Why? Because people would die of other things. That's a good thing. You don't want to die with late-stage dementia, right? You want to get Alzheimer's when you're 80, not 70, 90 when you're 90, not 80. You want to get Alzheimer's as late as possible in life because something else might take you before your symptoms become so debilitating. So I think we're going to be entering a new world where we have earlier identification, hopefully better lifestyle and medications that given early may really push this disease off. And I'm very excited that I think our research is going to be doubling and tripling in what we discover over the next 4 or 5 years even. But meanwhile, where are we again? What now? Well, we're with our caregivers who need so much support. Alzheimer's remains an emotionally, financially, physically stressful illness. I really admire the work of our former First Lady, Rosalind Carter, who actually created a center for caregiving in Atlanta. And I like these words because they remind us that there are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, and those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. So this is still an enormous challenge for us as we go forward in the future, thinking about how we can be effective for our families. And I want to say thank you again for the people who are streaming this, because hopefully you're getting some good tools. So a little flavor of just working with families in general. I mentioned this earlier, but sometimes even the best intentioned caregivers become the bad guy. You're the one saying no to mother, taking away the car, taking away the checkbook, right? But it's that delicate balance. We want to respect people's autonomy, but you can begin to look and learn ways to get a move done into memory care, develop ways to get that in-home help happening. And sometimes a concept that I think could be very helpful is something called, in ethics, substituted judgment. And basically what that means is that if your family member is not able to really say what they want or what they need because of their dementia, you can say to yourself, and this is really even going above and beyond like powers of attorney and all that, you can say to yourself, what would my mother have wanted me to do? So maybe mom is steadfast, she's never going to leave her house, she's going to stay in her house, but you discover she's maybe playing the bogus Canadian lottery, giving money to strangers. Maybe she's walking around town disheveled. Maybe she's still driving and a threat to the neighborhood. You can say to yourself, would mother have really wanted me to do nothing? Okay. Now, I guess everyone's different, but probably 90% of the time, I think the answer is no, that your family would have wanted you to act and wanted you to do things. And I think this is very helpful for families as they're thinking about kind of when to make good things happen. And so you begin to learn a lot of different strategies and techniques as a caregiver. I will say with my own mother and father, my mother had Alzheimer's. My dad was very effective and a wonderful guy. He passed away in 2012. But I think it was still tough for him, for example, to accept in-home help, right? But I always like to say it's easier to get forgiveness and permission sometimes. And I found a good caregiver, okay? And I found someone who worked in the neighborhood who was terrific. I kind of brought it up here and there, and I got shut down. Well, one time my mother fell, broke her left wrist, okay? She was in the hospital. I jumped in. I found Rosita, who worked in the neighborhood. I hired her, all right? And she started. My parents were upset with me. They weren't really happy. But guess what? After a week or two, they said, oh my gosh, David, Rosita, she makes a pretty good meatloaf. Yeah, oh, she did this and that. Rosita never left, right? I took advantage of that little crisis. Hopefully you don't have too big a crisis to actually get some in-home help done. So you begin to learn some finesse. Certainly support groups are a great place to go for lots of different help. But again, don't beat yourself up. I find even the best caregivers sometimes are so critical of themselves. But you can discover this winning way with support from the Alzheimer's Association, adopting the best friends approach or developing some strategies, focusing on lifting the person up, and good things can happen. So as I wind down, I always like to quote one gentleman here, Dr. Tom Kitwood, a very renowned researcher from the 1980s who did a lot of work with caregivers. And he said that caregivers are physicians of the human spirit. So I want to thank you all for being part of this class, and I'm going to give you all honorary doctorates here tonight. You're physicians of the human spirit, because it's so powerful how we help people with dementia. And again, I want to thank my friends at Trilogy who have the BFF program in their memory care neighborhoods in this whole region. Again, they've adopted best friends, and it's really been an honor for myself and my colleague to see such good companies and organizations kind of put their own spin on this. And I think if I ever get dementia, I think I'm going to come to your place and have my own BFF. So here's a slide for more information about their programming as well. So thank you all very much. And I think we can now transition into some questions and discussion. I know online you can put your questions in the chat room. We've already gotten a few questions here. Who would like to maybe share a few questions with me off the bat? And I'll do my best to be efficient in this process.
A question online. My sister-in-law, her hearing is so bad it prevents any meaningful interaction with others. How can we get a hearing aid company in Louisville to come to the Legacy and administer a hearing test?
Okay, I'll broaden that out a little bit, saying that, when people have vision issues, maybe they're legally blind, they have hearing issues, it's very tough. It's very tough. And with the hearing aids, Tom, one thing I'm sure you've seen too, it's a dilemma because the families will buy a hearing aid for $1,000 or more, and what happens? It gets lost or thrown away, the person doesn't wear it. So I guess what I'd say is every case is a bit different, but with hearing in particular, I would say there's still a lot of ways you can communicate with gestures, hand signs, with even written signs. I know we had a person one time where the caregiver would say, now mother, do you want to do this thumbs up or thumbs down? So with the hearing, I think do your best. I would certainly encourage trying the hearing aids and doing your best to kind of keep track of them. And then with vision, again, maybe even talking to some local centers like the Braille Institutes or Centers for Blind, the charities that work people who have vision impairments. Many of those will have good ideas and tools as well. And I don't know the specifics about having someone come into a building, but I'm guessing the staff there can help you figure that out.
How would you recommend planning financially if someone is first diagnosed with dementia?
Oh my goodness. Well, a couple of things about finances. Certainly, I would certainly consult any of your financial advisors or supporters. The Alzheimer's Association can help. There's actually a terrific a website run by the federal government called benefitscheckup.org, which is an official website of the government where you can put in your family member's social security and information, and it will tell you, are there any Veterans Administration benefits, other kinds of benefits through the federal government that could be very, very helpful. But yes, I think it is really tough to make this plan. Use community resources first. A lot of people will start off with the adult day centers. Often they're subsidized, nonprofits. So there are lots of ways you can make this work. And there are different price points within assisted living as well.
What do you recommend for my sister who refuses to visit mom?
Oh my gosh. Well, I am an only child, so perhaps I'm completely unqualified to talk about all the family dynamics. But I will say that in my career, again, I've seen families either coming together because of dementia or falling apart, which is really, really sad. Now, if your sister's refusing to visit, I'm kind of a believer, forgive me for going to a California place for a moment, but I'm kind of a believer in karma. It's not good karma, right? But focus on you and your relationship to mother. You visit. You have a social time. You enjoy every moment.